Death is a sinister and grieving subject for many. A thought some like to ignore, as it fills their mind with sorrowful memories and bitter discomfort. To the majority, it's not something that should be deemed as inspiring or uplifting, but instead ghastly and somewhat malevolent. Completely oblivious to the eyes of the wider population, it's a way of preserving and paying respects to the dead that has been going on in Europe and beyond for centuries. With thousands of cemeteries and crematoriums throughout Britain, there are only a few ossuaries. I am the Western Stay Mad, and let me take you on a journey to Britain's sinister yet beautiful charnel houses. The word ossuary comes from the Latin word os, meaning bone, and the term charnel house comes from the Latin term carnalis, meaning flesh. An ossuary or charnel house is a holy place where human skeletal remains are stored and sometimes used to decorate. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of ossuaries left in Europe. However, in Britain, following the Reformation, when the concept of purgatory was abolished, the practice came to an end. There would have been countless charnel houses in Britain prior to the Reformation, but now we are left with just 4, or at least 4 that we know of. Join me now in the oldest county in England, where I pay a visit to the ossuary, the biggest collection of human bones in Britain. Right guys, yeah, I just arrived here at St Leonard's Church in Hythe. So yes, this is the first ossuary of this trip. What we're about to see is the biggest collection of human bones in Britain. Alright then guys, here we are. In what I said already, it's the largest collection of human bones in Britain. There's a total of around 1,200 skulls in here, all neatly placed in these cabinets here. This is not a private collection, these are of the deceased. The most common story is that this is an extension of the church, which was built over these graves, and thus these were exhumed and stored here, which is a very common story for ossuaries. So there's several suggestions to make as to where these skulls come from. The research goes that these tracks back to the 13th, 14th, possibly even 15th century. There are rumours to suggest that these are bones of the victims of the Battle of Hastings. There's also rumours to say that these are Scandinavians. There's no real answer. No one knows where these come from, which makes this ossuary quite unique. And unfortunately, back in 2018, there was a break-in and several rows of skulls were actually stolen. None of yet have been returned. So on this rack here, you can see that this skull here has got a tumour, which makes it stick out a bit from the rest of the skulls. So we've got this one here as well. You can see it's got a bit of a hole in the skull, and that's speculated to be from a stabbing. And also in this cabinet we've got these 2 young skulls. One's 4.5, and that one's meant to be around 6 or 7 years old. So as you might have been able to tell since I've been here, I've been very excited. Okay, and you're probably wondering what is so exciting about being in a crypt full of, well, dead people, dead things. And you know, this is a very cathartic thing. This is a very euphoric thing. This is something that can only be experienced and at moments like this, when you're actually in here. And you know, it takes a certain understanding. People might come here and be completely grossed out, completely terrified, think it's immoral to a degree, that you know, these should be buried, these should be cremated. Whereas as for me, this is for me prime liberation. I'm stood here looking at a wall of skulls. And also, don't forget, these skulls are looking at me. All of these skulls here were once people that experienced love, hate, grief, sorrow, joy, and this is a part of their story. This doesn't so much give me more motivation and inspiration for life, but it definitely provides me with more clarity and maybe motivation to sort of do what it is I need to do in this one life, because one day I will be one of these. As the famous memento mori goes, what you are, we once were. What we are, you will be. Another thing is, what people tend to forget about ossuaries is that they are places of worship. These are Christian sites. This is a church. Okay? These have been laid to rest here. People come in to pay their respects. You cannot do that any more intimately than in an ossuary. This is not a place for commercial tourism. Even though tourists do come here, you've got somewhere like, say, the Sedek ossuary in the Czech Republic, who have recently banned photography because they get so many tourists in there who are just completely overlooking the real holy reasons we have ossuaries. This is why I say it takes a certain level of understanding and respect when you enter these places of death. Death, I know and understand, can be a very touchy subject for people, but it shouldn't be. For me, it's one of the most inspiring things. I'm going to be leaving this ossuary today feeling very, very liberated and motivated. The sort of cathartic peace I get staring into the eyes and knowing that they are also staring back at me. My only regret is that I don't pay ossuaries visits more often. Right, I am done here now in this crypt. It's been an absolute pleasure to be back. So yeah, this will linger with me for a while. Anyways, this is just part one. There's more to come. What a pleasure it was to be back in Hythe. Isn't it strange that on the way there and on the way back, the weather was horrendous, but whilst I was there, the sun came out and I had the whole crypt to myself. It wasn't until I had stopped filming when an abundance of people turned up. It's almost like the dead were waiting for me, blessing my time there, and were feeling somewhat photogenic that day. You can see by my excitement and joy in my time there that I'm not scared or intimidated being surrounded by the dead. But getting over this phobia is just the first step in the path to having real understanding and connection in these very special places. Join me now in the country's capital, where I walk above the bones of the disease that have been there for centuries. Right, here we are in London at St. Bride's Church. In the crypt, in this church, lies yet another charnel house. So, let's have a look. So this church was destroyed in the London Blitz. In the 1950s, when it got reconstructed, a crypt full of bones was found. It is supposed that these bones could have been put there due to the overpopulation of London and obviously graveyards being full up and thus being put in crypts across the city. The crypt contained 227 individually identified people, as well as around 7,000 human remains. Where this ossuary lies now is within this crypt, which is unfortunately closed. But however, the ossuary itself is actually closed to the public and only open on special tours. I was fortunate enough to go on one back in 2017 and see the ossuary. So I wouldn't be getting any footage of this ossuary. However, here's a couple of pictures that friends of mine have taken for you to look at. Since the discovery and with the research about the ossuary, it turns out that bones were forbidden to be put in these crypts following the cholera pandemic back in 1854. Sorry if you guys were expecting me to go inside the ossuary, but firstly, it's been closed to the public for a while, and even when it was semi-open to the public, it'd be one tour a week on a Tuesday, which is when I went back in 2017. Even then, photography was forbidden, so I wouldn't be able to get any footage for you guys anyways. So we're thankful to my friends for helping me out and letting me use their pictures. Do you wish to come here and book a tour and possibly see the ossuary? There's the website. Drop them an email, and yeah, hopefully you might be in luck. Yep, so as I pointed out, the crypt is closed. However, even if I was to go into the crypt, the ossuary and the crypt are completely separate, shut off from each other. You need special access to get in there, whether it's a tour guide or some official. I've looked around. I am in this church completely by myself. It's really quiet. There's no one here for me to even ask if I can go in and have a look. So, for now, the bones don't want to be interrupted. I've seen them before. I know they're there. Beneath my feet, it's around 7,000 human remains. Quite fascinating. I remember when I was first here, part of that tour guide, there was, say, around 5 to 10 of us. Among that group was an American family. They had no idea about the ossuary. We started the tour here, we worked our way around the church, we made our way downstairs into the crypt. When we were sat there, the lady, the very good tour guide, was explaining to us about the crypt. And then she went on to say, something this church does have, and I was like rubbing my hands like, yes, here we go, is an ossuary. This American family were completely confused. What's an ossuary, they were saying. The tour lady went on to explain what an ossuary is, and their faces were just in horror. They had no idea. And even one or two of the people from this tour group didn't even go into the ossuary. They just felt too uncomfortable with the idea. However, everyone else was just completely blown away, and it opened up this whole new world for them, this whole new perspective of death. So please, if they hadn't come here, they would never experience that. As I said already, there is no more intimate way to connect with the dead than with an ossuary. You can cry by graves or by an urn, but see physical human remains of the deceased puts everything into a whole new light. Here are these pictures again. So, we will not be interrupting the bones today. So, in this incredibly noisy part of London, with the River Thames just there. You have this really obscure gem. I really hope next time you come to London, because obviously we all come to London for something, whether we like it or not, this has sparked your interest, and I hope you might want to come to this church and check it out, maybe when the crypt's open. But like I said, you don't have to go to the crypt, or even into the ossuary to know that they're there. Like I said before, they're right beneath my feet as we speak, and one day I will be one of them. And once again, the dead blessed me with solitude. When I arrived in the church, only one person was there, and very briefly. And as I left, someone walked in. Even if I didn't see the bones, their presence was very much with me and greatly resonating, giving me the peace and calmness that only the dead can provide. Now I'm heading to the English Midlands, where I'll be documenting the last ossuary on this video. Right, now we're in Roughwell. This is right in the centre of the town, and this is Holy Trinity Church. And this is where ossuary number 3 of this documentary lies. So yeah, let's go. This 13th century charnel house was discovered in around 1700 by a sexton who fell through one of the southern windows and into the bone crypt, finding himself in pitch black darkness on a pile of dusty human skeletal remains. The southern windows were most likely covered up at the time of the Reformation. There are approximately 2,500 human remains in the crypt. Theories surrounding the origin of the bones are namely Danes slaughtered by Saxons, men fallen at the Bosworth battlefield in 1485, or maybe just victims of the Black Death. However, these have all been debunked, and these are likely just the remains of local residents from the medieval times. There is a 50-50 ratio of male and female bones, with even some animal bones within the piles. Okay, we're nearly done here now. It's been an absolute pleasure to return to this amazing ossuary, where time really feels like it's stopped. No words. That really was incredible. Again, I am in awe. The atmosphere, the tranquility, everything about being in an ossuary is something you don't get anywhere else. Anyway, as for now, there's one last thing about this video I need to do, and it involves a guest, and that guest being a good friend of mine. And this is someone that's recently done a very special documentary about a hidden ossuary in the UK. Come join me, where we sit down and have a chat. Right folks, here we have Mr. Simon Lucas. He is a musician and a video maker, and he recently made a documentary about a hidden ossuary in Worcester. So, thanks for coming today, Simon.
No worries, good to see you, Joe.
And you. And so, how did this come about, this documentary?
Well, I've known about Worcester's hidden ossuary since I was about 18 years old, and that was about 22 years ago now, so you can tell how old I am, you do the maths. But I first read about it in an obscure local history pamphlet. There's never really been anything said about it, there's never been any photographs or film taken of it. It was almost mythology that there is a hidden ossuary in Worcester. And I knew where roughly it was located. It's near Worcester Cathedral, part of the original monastic complex there. And it was somewhere where I'd always wanted to try and access and take some photos of, because there's no record of it at all.
Yes.
And having an interest in this kind of thing, you know, as you do, you want to see it, you want to make a record of it for for historical purposes more than anything, really. It was a really strange chain of events that led to us actually making the documentary. My parents are friends with the Bishop of Worcester, and his late wife, Denise Ing, wrote a book about the ossuary.
Yes.
Now, the ossuary itself actually is in a crypt underneath the cellar of what is now the Bishop's house. It formerly had the Charnel chapel above it, and that was knocked down in the 1600s after the Reformation, and a more modern house built on top of it, although the modern house is now over 400 years old.
Wow.
And that's where the bishop lives, and the ossuary is in his private residence, essentially. I kept badgering my dad to have a word with his mate, the bishop.
I would be doing the same thing.
You know, can you get me access so I can? And anyway, it was not something I thought was ever going to happen. And then the company I work for, we make films and videos for mostly kind of corporate films. We make TV commercials, all sorts of things like that. And I'd always told my boss about this ossuary, because we're always looking for interesting projects that we can make special interest films about, just for our own kind of purposes, not for any kind of normal client work that we do. And it was something I mentioned when I first started working for the company, which is nearly 7 years ago now. And it, as if some weird twist of fate, a girl called Eleanor started working as an intern for us.
Okay.
She was doing all of her introductions and so forth, and it came out that her family was the bishop, and her mum was the late Denise Ing.
Wow.
The bishop's late wife.
Yeah.
And so I immediately piped up. So you know about the ossuary?
Yes.
Then she was like, yes, it's underneath the cellar in her dad's house. And I was like, right, okay, can I see it? Please, can I see it? And we ended up sort of suggesting this idea of making a documentary about the place, and Eleanor kindly put us in touch with her father, the bishop, and
the rest is history.
The rest is history. We've now filmed in there. There's a bit more to it than that, which I should probably talk about. Eleanor's mum, Denise, had written a book about living above an ossuary, which is called A Tour of Bones, which I have here now.
Yes.
So Denise lived above this crypt, and it was obviously quite a strange thing to get used to, living above an ossuary. You know, it's not something you would normally.
No, of course not.
Have in a regular house. And so she wrote this book, and she went on a tour of European ossuaries, many of which you have been to,
yes,
and I've been to. But sadly, whilst Denise was writing the book, she received a terminal cancer diagnosis.
That's right, yeah.
And the book is, more than anything, it's a kind of reflective book on living life to the full and enjoying every aspect of life. And that doesn't mean going crazy, it just means savouring every single aspect of life, whether that's like tasting a mouthful of food, or the tiniest things, just enjoying those things. So we wanted to reflect that in the film we've made, and the film is part kind of history of this hidden ossuary, part philosophical comment on the sentiments that Denise made in the book.
Nice. It's a very, very beautifully written book. I've read it a couple of times myself. I even have the audiobook in case you don't like reading it. For people that are new to ossuaries, this is the go-to recommendation I give. Read this book. It'll really open up your minds to what it is about ossuaries we find so fascinating and liberating and tranquil. And that sort of brings me to my next question. What was it like entering that Charnel house, knowing that you were one of the first people to enter it in decades, possibly. I don't know, a long time.
Well, yeah, I don't think we weren't the first people to enter it in a long time. We were the first people to film down there,
Right.
and the first people to ever take images,
Right.
photographs, and video of the ossuary. It had been knocked through in the Victorian period when they were making renovations to the road, and they collapsed part of the roof
Yes.
of the ossuary, and literally fell into a pile of bones, essentially, surrounded by skulls, as you would expect to be in an ossuary. There were some bones that were uncovered in the chapter house in the cathedral, because the house is right next to Worcester Cathedral, and they were discovered in the 90s, and they were interred in the Charnel house itself,
Right.
in later years. So it's quite strange when you go in there. It's not an ossuary in the same way that you would imagine a place like Rothwell or Hythe or one of the European ossuaries. It's pure chaos down there. It's just piles and piles of bones in no kind of ordered sense or anything like that. It's just a medieval vaulted crypt full of bones. And when I say full of bones, I mean it's off the original floor. It's got to be 8 foot high
Never.
of just pure human bones.
So I can imagine it took you a few moments to sort of for it to sink in.
Oh yeah, it was phenomenal.
I bet at first it was quite well. I mean, even for someone that's had an experience of going to ossuary, it's quite intimidating in that sense. That's nothing's in order.
Yeah.
You know, this is not like an open to public ossuary where
No,
things
it's
are in
not.
order.
Yeah.
You literally got to watch every step. You don't know what you're doing. It's like,
and that's one thing to point out about this ossuary, is that it, as far as I know, it won't ever be open to the public because it's in a private house, and
Right,
it's
so.
and it will be kept as it is. I mean, the work that it would take to undertake,
yes.
ordering it in any kind of sense would be so vast, and it's I think it will be left as it is in this private house. So it's
Rightly so. Some things like that shouldn't be open to the public. I mean, obviously, because it's such a private place, and
yeah. So it was, I mean, in that sense, it was a real privilege to be able
absolutely
to see it, and I'm very grateful for Bishop John of Worcester letting us make this film and speak to him about it.
And I got to say, I really cannot wait to see it. It's after reading the book Tour of Bones and after talking to you about it a lot over the years, to actually see a proper documentation of it.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm buzzing. I'm absolutely buzzing.
Yeah.
I mean, it is actually finished now.
The film is pretty much finished. Yeah, we've literally 2 days ago we actually finished the edit of it. We're planning to send it to some film festivals, and we've entered it for some film awards.
Yes.
So the way that these film awards work and these festivals work, they like to have exclusivity on the film before it's put on any online platforms. So we're not sure where we're going to be showing it yet until we know what film festivals it's going to be in and things like that. We are going to be having a special premiere of it in the chapter house of the cathedral, hopefully, which will be an invite thing, and I think we're going to do it on a kind of charity donation type thing. So for a charity of the bishop's choosing. So it's going to be a little small fee to attend, and maybe a Q&A with a few people involved in the project. So
amazing.
So yeah, hopefully you'll be able to come to that.
I would love to.
Yeah.
So during this sort of documentation I've been making of the UK ossuaries, a point I keep making time and time again is like ossuaries are very, very special in the fact they're very tranquil, they're very cathartic, they're very, it takes a certain element of understanding and to find peace in these sort of places. I mean, I like we were saying earlier, like we find ossuaries so peaceful.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get you got like an essence. It's like, it feels like time has stopped.
Yeah.
When you enter an ossuary.
Yeah, yeah.
Another point I keep making is that you cannot get more intimate with the dead
No, that's
than
true,
in an
yeah.
ossuary. And on top of that, I always make it clear that these are Christian sites of worship.
Yeah.
It's stuff that's something that people tend to overlook a lot.
Yes. Yes.
So, with you, I mean, like, what keeps you coming back? What is it about when you exit an ossuary after being in one for like an hour or so? What is it you experience that you don't experience elsewhere, like in a graveyard or something like that?
I think they're quite profound places that you on the face of it, people might think that they're kind of scary, spooky places, but they're really not at all. They are, like you say, very peaceful places. They are the bones of people that often lived hundreds of years ago, and you can see these people literally face to face, and you can wonder what sort of lives they live. They're all people that had feelings, that you know, experienced all the emotions that we experience, and ultimately, you know, you're faced with the fact that we're all going to end up like that. You know, no matter whether you're the richest person in the world or, you know, whatever, you're going to end up like that. So I think, yeah, you're left with a profound sense that I think that echo the sentiments in you know, Denise's book, that you should kind of save a life, and you know,
something that she says in that book is like, we enter these ossuaries asking questions, when really the skulls are asking us questions. That's
I totally get that. Yeah, absolutely. Asking you questions on how you should go forward living your life, and
really,
things like that. And I definitely think that's one of the main things we wanted to get across in our film, is that philosophical element. It's not just kind of an interest piece about the history of the place, which it is that, but it is so much more than that, you know, and you definitely get that from, you know, what you're doing in your visits to ossuaries.
I really hope this brings people a better understanding of ossuaries. It's a very, especially in the UK, where we have these are the only 3 that are open to the public.
Well, that's another really interesting thing about the UK. It's quite unique in when we're talking about ossuaries. There are only the 4 that we've spoken about. There is obviously the one in Worcester that is very kind of secret, that we're talking about this film that we've made. Then there's Rothwell, Hythe, and
London,
which I can't remember the name of the church.
St Bride's Church.
St Bride's, right? Yeah. I've not been there.
I was there on Monday. It's closed to the public now. You can do it on special tours, and
right.
even then you can't have photography.
Okay.
So
That's
it's
a shame.
that
is a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame. I went there back in 2017, and I did actually see it.
Right.
But it's very interesting.
Right. Is that quite ornate? Like.
The problem with that one is you only get like a couple of seconds to look. It's literally
really?
they open the chamber, you stick your head in left, right, and
right. Okay.
That's it. So you can't really experience as much as you would with the others. But still, it's definitely worth seeing. Especially out of all the things you could see in London.
I think what's really interesting about English ossuaries is its relationship with how people perceive death and the afterlife, and how that changed after the Reformation. And that's something that we have a professor of early modern history, Professor Darren Aldridge of Worcester, who spoke at length in the documentary about the period around the Reformation, and how people in the Catholic mindset, because England would have been a Catholic country before the Reformation, there was this idea of purgatory. And when you die, you go to purgatory, and then your soul then moves on beyond that after a certain period. And they believed that your human remains had to be kept in consecrated ground to be able to achieve the journey to heaven beyond purgatory. And that is essentially why a lot of the charnel houses existed, because people wanted their bones kept in consecrated ground, and the charnel priest to say prayers for them so that they would reach heaven eventually. And essentially that's why there are no charnel houses in England post Henry VIII's Reformation in the 1500s, because the idea of purgatory was abolished, and we became an Anglican or Protestant nation, and charnel houses would have been very commonplace, as they are in parts of Europe, but now they are very, very rare, which makes them, for me, all the more special.
100%.
So much rarer.
Right, anyway, thank you so much, Simon. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. So keep an eye out for his documentary. Hopefully it shouldn't be too long, and I'll leave all links in the description. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. Nice one. I just realised I didn't say the name of the documentary in it.
Oh, what was the name?
It's called Life Over Death.
Life Over Death. Right. Watch out for that, guys. Right, cheers.
Cheers.
And once again, the dead somewhat blessed me. On a journey to the crypt, the drive was made difficult because of extremely heavy rain, making me anxious that my time there would involve dodging the bad weather. But thus, as I arrived, the rain stopped and the sun broke through the clouds, making my time there even more of a pleasure. Thank you for joining me on this journey to Britain's forgotten and very much overlooked charnel houses. I really hope this has broadened your perspective and made you view the subject in a whole new light. I also hope this has inspired you to visit any of these ossuaries or others around Europe and afar, or at the very least inspired you to look into the subject further. I've already recommended the fantastic book Tour of Bones by Denise Inge. I must also strongly recommend this book, The Empire of Dead by Paul Gudinoris. It's essentially like an encyclopedia of ossuaries around the world. I also very much recommend this book here, Eternal Rest, written by Anna Katrina Hopflinger and my good friend Eve Muller. A beautifully written book with sublime photography that will really touch your soul. I will now continue through life with the peace knowing that death is nothing to be feared or anything to be considered taboo. The tranquil peace I find staring into the eyes of the dead will always be some sort of otherworldly refuge. Never forget, death closes the doors of time and opens the gates to eternity. As the famous memento mori goes, what you are, we once were. What we are, you will be.